All right, guys, this is a long time overdue. The head coach at Xtreme Couture 2022 Coach of the Year and the man behind such fighters as Sean Strickland, Chris Curtis, and the man of the hour himself, Francis Ngannou, Coach Eric Nicksick. Welcome to Submission Radio for the very first time. How are you, man?
I'm doing well, man. Huge fan of the show, so I appreciate you guys having me on.
Well, man, we're a huge fan of you, and sorry it's taken so long, but I kind of feel like it's a great time to do this, man, because special time for the team, right? Francis Ngannou revealing this landmark deal with PFL MMA. And I know you guys went to dinner last night, so you got to break it down for us, man. What was it like sitting down at dinner after such a difficult and kind of up and down, and I guess it would be quite emotional journey to this point where you guys got here now?
Well, as his coach, I got to call him out. He was 2 hours late. The guy fell asleep. So, we planned on dinner, but he didn't know I had set the team up, and it was a surprise. So he thought it was dinner with me and him, and we were going back and forth about who was going to drive, and he won't drive in my shitty Kia and all this stuff. So we've been going back and forth, man. And then all of a sudden it was radio silence. So I showed up to the house and I was knocking on the door. He don't answer. It's like, I bet you this dude fell asleep, man, because he got up early to run all the media stuff for the East Coast. And sure as shit, he's asleep. So I head to the restaurant, and I keep everybody on hold and everything else. So we ended up having quite a bit of old fashions and drinking pretty good until he finally woke up. So to answer your question, and I know I'm joking and stuff, but man, it was so great to get the team all back together and just sit down in that environment, because we hadn't done that since the Cyril Gane victory. And just being in the same room, being at Barry Steakhouse, and getting the family back together, if you will. It meant a lot, man. And I think that there were so many questions amongst all of us. And it's like having this band, and you don't know, like, when the band's going to get back together, and when we go back on tour, and who's going to do what. And a lot of those questions were answered last night. And it was very nice to be able to sit down and, break some bread and be able to talk about those things.
How stressful and difficult was it for you during this period where Francis was a free agent and there was the negotiations? And I know there was so much speculation and talks from, media and analysts saying, like, man, maybe Francis made the wrong move. Maybe he should, go back to the UFC. Maybe that's the best case scenario. How aware of everything were you? Like, how much did you know behind the scenes of, like, well, actually, this is where the ship is steering? And how stressful was it for you? Because really, until it was confirmed, there was no guarantees, right?
Yeah. And, to be honest with you guys, in the very beginning, it was stressful. And I think it let me down in a lot of ways, just because I always had this vision of us fighting Jon Jones.
Yeah.
And that was what was always on the table for us. And I'm speaking from a coach and a competitor. I wanted the opportunity to be able to go and compete against arguably the best to ever do it. In my opinion, the best to ever do it in Jon Jones. And that was merely my only heartbreak in the whole situation, was just the competitiveness in me. I wanted to crack at it, man. I wanted to try to put a game plan together, and with my best athlete, and go and beat this guy who I think is the greatest to ever do it. So there was a time there, to be honest with you guys, I was pretty depressed, but it had to do with more of like, man, we've done 4 years of just grueling work in the room, and now we're not going to be able to show it against the guy who would be the one to cement your legacy, if you will. So that took me about a week or two. And then over time, I started to realize, man, it's out of my control. It's out of my grasp. If you start to buy into all the social media stuff and reading into all that stuff, it becomes more of a trap than anything. And it robs you of your joy, right? And I just started to just get off the social media side of things and stop reading into nonsense and BS, the stuff that really didn't matter, because it was affecting you in a way but you have control over it. I don't have to log in Twitter and read Twitter. It's not a mandatory thing for my day. Mm-hmm. So I think it was really a maturity thing for me too, even to grow during this process and allow Francis to do what he believed. And really, I said last night at dinner, I said, I trusted the next chapter because I knew who the author was. And that was it. I just left it to faith, and I believe in the guy and what he's capable of doing. And here we are today.
I think the other thing that people liked about the Jon Jones fight is it would be a legacy fight for Francis, right? Like, if he beat Jon Jones, like, dude, what a feather in your cap. But with this deal, and obviously we're yet to see it play out, but do you think that in this deal, this kind of almost makes Francis's legacy bigger in a different way, in the sense that like he's the first guy to do this, and like he's the captain of the ship for like PFL Africa. He's got this, you know, landmark deal, which is apparently in the I think almost 8 figures. Like this almost makes his legacy bigger than if he just beat Jon Jones, right?
I think you're right, but I think it's very different in the legacy. It's groundbreaking, sure. Right? Like he I think he did something where he set a tone for other fighters to know that there's other things that you're capable of doing, right? Like it's not like Muhammad Ali level, but I think it's this generation of combat sports level of going, hey man, like I can step outside certain organizations and go and do things and become part of the business and have equity in a business. And, you know, the thing too that I started to see a lot with this was, you know, people were really cheering for failure, for downfall. And I wonder like where we're at as a society this day and age, like, why are we cheering for failure? Like success is not finite. It's infinite. Like we all can be successful, and we should be cheering for one another and hoping for their successes and bringing that energy back onto us. And those are some of the things that I started to see within this. And, you know, the Jon Jones fight, as far as the combat sports side of things, that will always cement anyone's legacy if you're able to beat him, right? Like that's the one. Mm-hmm. But there's other avenues, I think, that you can cement a different type of legacy. And I think that's the path that Francis went on.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, bringing up people like Muhammad Ali, and people have changed combat sports at the time as they were doing it, right, Eric? There was a similar reaction from people, but once things sort of finished up and people were able to step back and look at some of the stuff that he's done, I think there's a lot of similar things with Francis about the way that he set a precedent now, right, for fighters to be able to be paid a fair share of the pie. And do you feel like, I know Jon Jones was online and he was saying like, you know, you're calling yourself the baddest man on the planet from across the street. Who does that? And Francis is like, come across the street. But do you think Jon's kind of missing the part of it where fighters like himself even will kind of benefit from this precedent being set? Do you think some of these fighters just aren't realizing how big this precedent is?
Especially because Jon Jones, it wasn't that long ago that he was in a massive battle with the UFC about, you know, the money that he felt he was, you know, deserving of.
There you go. I mean, he was one of the guys that was, I mean, literally like 80 tweets back and forth between him and Dana, bickering about what was said, what wasn't said, and pay. And now all of a sudden, you know, people just tend to forget about that. And remember the timeline too, guys. We were told we were going to be fighting, the winner out of Stipe and Francis was fighting Jon Jones. Mm-hmm. Jon announced February of 2020 that he was going to be moving up to heavyweight. We fought Stipe March of 2021. That was a year and 1 month that he was transitioning over to heavyweight. Then we're like, hey, you guys are going to fight him in July. Then nothing. It was crickets. We were gearing up to fight this dude for July. Nothing happened. There was no movement there. And, you know, it's just ironic that that's the card that they're going to play. It is what it is, man. And to be quite honest with you, I love Jon. I do, man. I appreciate him. I love what he's doing. He's keeping things, you know, in the media and keeping things rolling. That's fine. And I hope that he does understand, like, really what Francis did will ultimately benefit and have a chain reaction for other fighters down the line. And he's fighting for fighters' rights. He's doing all the things that he feels that moves him. And in the past, what happened is guys had that same identity or that same ideologies of what they were trying to accomplish. And to UFC's credit, they just threw money at it. They're like, here, well, you can't do that, but here's more money, right? And then it just went away. It just went away. So no one ever had to deal with that kind of thing. So it's definitely a new precedence, I think, that Francis is able to set. And like you guys said, maybe in time, more and more guys like Jon will truly appreciate what Francis was trying to do.
Exactly. And, you know, obviously like Randy Couture was someone who was in that battle as well. But obviously we saw how that played out. And it got to a point where he was like not allowed into a UFC event, ridiculous stuff like that. So it's great to see Francis be able to get to that next level. Just quickly on that, I know it's like combat sports is a crazy world, right? Like we've seen Conor fight Floyd Mayweather, like Nate Diaz almost came back to the UFC to do the Ultimate Fighter. Do you think down the track there's any scenario that you actually see in your mind a way for Jon and Francis to fight down the line?
I'm just an optimistic dude by nature, so I would never say no. I wouldn't close the door on that. And why wouldn't we though? Like if you think about it, let's say Jon goes out and wins his next fight, he beats Stipe or whoever they line up against him. He's already mentioned like there's nothing really else out there for me but Francis Ngannou, right?
Yeah.
And if we're only on a 2-fight deal with PFL, and maybe there's some other things, and PFL to their credit has been, just they've worked this deal marvelously. They've really been they never were pushy, or they never were trying to make Francis uncomfortable with anything. I think that there's something maybe there later on down the line, because you got to remember, yes, Dana and Hunter, those guys run the UFC, but there's also people above them. There's investors, and there's WME and IMG and people that really, ESPN, for example. So I feel like they have bosses on bosses that might say like, no, dude, we're going to do this and we're going to roll this out, because that is the fight that I felt everybody wanted to see. Kind of reminded me of like when with Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather, when they missed it the first time, right? It was the one that was everybody wanted to see happen, and it never really happened for a couple years later on down the line. This one, I think will be very important. That Randy and Fedor fight, it's again like they don't. That's the one that's always going to bother the UFC. Yeah, we didn't get that fight done, and that was the one to make. So, live from your history and know from your past. And it's like, man, maybe later on down the line, in a year or two from now, that fight can transpire, and everybody's going to be happy.
Just going back to that deal, just before we move on from it, what is like your favorite aspects of it that people may not realize, or like a couple of little things in that PFL deal that really stick out to you?
It by far was the very first. So he called me the day that we were going to sign. He called me in the morning. We FaceTimed, and I didn't know. I knew what the plan was going to be, but I didn't know he was signing that day. And he's like, "Hey, I want to be on FaceTime with you when we sign." Like it was a big moment for him. And the first thing he said to me was, "I got PFL Africa, Bubba." And I was like, and it pulled at his heartstrings, right? So, a little backstory, like Francis has charities lined up out there. He has a jiu-jitsu school out there. He's doing some vocational things for kids to learn how to understand social media, so they can do things where, it's almost like a little education system for them. So they don't have to travel. All they really need is internet, but they can find work, and they can do things to essentially, build and grow and grow their education. So anything that has to do with, reviving his country and doing things and giving them more hope and giving them lines of work, that's what moves him. So when that was the very first thing he said to me was PFL Africa. Now, this was something that they've already had in the works. So really the infrastructure was being constructed and being built, and now Francis became available. Who better to run that infrastructure than Francis Ngannou? So that was, to me, was the very first thing that he felt like he was a part of something dynamic. He was a part of something not only as a fighter, but as a part of their growth for the future. When we beat Stipe, I felt the love from an entire continent as his coach, man. And the men and women of Cameroon and the men and women of Africa, the love that they have for Francis Ngannou, he shares that same amount of love back towards them. So I can feel that when he got this deal. That was the main thing that really moved him. And I applaud these guys for being creative and finding something that really pulled his heartstrings.
It's crazy, man, because you think back to like Israel Adesanya. He spoke about a lot of times about how like when MMA sort of catches on in Africa, like, man, a lot of those guys are going to take over. Similar to how people predicted like the takeover of like Dagestani and Russian and, that whole kind of area with like the wrestling and stuff. And so for Francis to be the guy that's like going to be pioneering that and sort of helping mold and affect the change in that area is just crazy. And the fact that he's got, I think, like a percentage or equity in PFL Africa, that's like his baby. So that's just insane. And then the fact that he's got, I think one thing that sort of surprised me, a lot of it was like, okay, this is great. One thing that I was like, oh, wow, is that his opponent for his PFL fights is going to be getting a fair share. Crazy, right? I think it was something like about $2 million, right?
What an asshole. What an asshole. Who would do that?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this guy, what is he thinking? But he's using where he's at in his career, and he's not just saying these things. He's doing it with his actions. People said he's stupid, he's dumb, he's this, he's that. Never happened, never will happen. But how many people were hitting me up saying, I'll fight Francis for $2 million? Do you know how many people that fight for other organizations within our gym that just sat around practice yesterday and applauded because they don't have a voice and they can't speak up about the injustices that they see. So, this guy's trying and he's doing his best. Now, when those checks clear and everybody sees, these guys are actually getting paid, that's another thing. But for him to go out there and lobby for that and make sure that not only, his continent is getting taken care of, they're doing the things with PFL Africa, but dude, the dude he's trying to knock out, he wants to make sure that that guy is taken care of, that he has a camp, that his family's taken care of, that everything, like there's a reason why he's going to go step in the cage with Francis Ngannou. He should be getting paid for that.
Well, I'll tell you, man, and people may not realize this, a heavyweight in the UFC with, sort of a successful career, maybe not reaching the title, they might not make that in their entire journey. I mean, a lot of people really struggle to make that kind of money. So to set a precedent like that is absolutely huge. And especially when you fight a champion, we've heard people talk about how much money they make, and it could be pretty rough, man. So it's great. It's great to see that people are going to be looked after being a part of such a great experience and a huge moment with Francis. I got to ask you as well, Eric. Obviously, the Tyson Fury boxing match, that's another huge one that people want to see. How do you sort of balance that with this whole PFL deal? I mean, is that still something that you'd be looking to do next? Is the PFL thing next, and then you do it in between the PFL fights? How do you sort of look at that boxing match?
Well, I think he definitely wants to box first. And now figuring out who that opponent might be, that's been kind of something that's been really up in the air from my perspective. I just don't know. I don't really talk to him about a lot of those things when it comes to the boxing element. We've gone over ideas of who, like, if we're gonna be coaching, who's gonna be coaching, what boxing coaches will we bring in, training partners, all the schematics, I think, when it comes to that. But it makes the most sense just because he's still actually rehabbing his knee. It's the least evasive to be able to go in and box rather than have to go in and get back into an MMA camp. And then, while he's, I guess, transitioning over, go make that money. Go collect as much money as you can. But, Luke Thomas brought up a good point today. We were chatting today, and he's like, are you afraid of any timeline? And he's right in a sense. It's like, if we get to like August or September and we don't have anything boxing, we got to transition over back into MMA and start making sure that we're getting all of our, skill set taken care of, because that's where we've thrived our best as a team and as a camp, is not during training camps. It's outside of camps. We're able to grow our best outside of training camp. That's when you can try new things and add new ingredients. And hey, man, today we're only going to spar southpaw. We're going to do this, or we're going to wrestle. We're going to do all these other things to build out and round out your skill set in case you can't knock somebody out. What else do we have in our arsenal? So it's very important to me as a coach to make sure that we have that time on the mat of just self-growth, man. You guys know the game is constantly evolving, and you got to stay ahead of that curve. So those are the little things for me that I get worried about, that I voice my opinion on. Like, hey, even if we're not boxing or even if we're not doing MMA, we still need to be doing drills. We still need to be hitting pads. Shit, dude, we worked a long, hard road of wrestling, and I got my ass kicked for it. I don't want you to lose up any of that time that we spent on the mats learning how to wrestle. Let's get in there and get back and just start grinding again, even if it's a couple wrestling practices a week. That's always going to transition. So just staying active in the gym, I think, is going to be very important no matter what he decides.
You're 100% right, because by all accounts, it seems like the PFL debut is going to be sometime in 2024. So that leaves a lot of time in between. And then even in terms of like keeping Francis Ngannou's name out there so that when he does fight in the PFL, you make as much return on like pay-per-views and things like that. So boxing, and then you mentioned the injuries and the rehab. So boxing just makes perfect sense this year. Let's have a fun fight. But even the opponents, like I know that lately there's been talks maybe in Anthony Joshua, because maybe Tyson and Deontay maybe not the likeliest. But then there's the talks of all the Saudi Arabia tournament towards the end of the year between all the biggest names. I wonder, as a coach, from your perspective, for anyone sort of from the boxing side looking at this and going, man, Francis could never compete with a guy like, say, a Tyson Fury or Deontay or Anthony Joshua. What do you see in Francis that gives him sort of, the chance to fight and beat one of those guys? And also, what is the main goal with one of these boxing matches, right? I don't see Francis as a guy who's like, oh, I'll just come and just like whatever happens. I don't see it as like just to make a paycheck. So what is the biggest goal with one of these boxing matches, other than Francis ticking off the dream of, having a boxing match?
I think it's his competitive nature. He wants to compete. This was always his goal. His first combat sports dream was the box. So this is kind of reliving that goal. But man, we're jumping in the deep end, and this is by no means are we thinking we're going to go out and just smoke Tyson Fury or any of these guys in a boxing match right away. The biggest thing that we always talked about was like, I think you're not necessarily going to screw yourself, but if you think you're just going to go in and outbox these guys, you're going to have to come up with some new wrinkles, something different, something that they might not be accustomed to seeing. And what are some of those things that we do in MMA that they don't do in boxing all the time? And to me, that's motion, stance switches within motion, doing things that like I think that most boxers wouldn't see on a day-to-day basis, and also maybe they don't practice in their own game. So you watch a guy like Israel. Israel can strike from both stances pretty seamlessly, but he does it so well because he's able to set traps. Obviously we're eliminating the kick game when it comes to boxing, but there's a lot of things you can do with the corner posts in the boxing ring. You can funnel guys in certain directions, make them feel like they have an exit, and be able to do things out of a different stance. So I think we have to take a different approach. That's really the only way that I think we're going to be successful. The nice thing about it is I think we're all, as coaching staffs and fighters, we're all very creative in what we do. And Francis is willing to listen to some of those things. And then we were able to go try some of those things. Like he sparred Joe Joyce a while back. And that was the first thing that I noticed was he's trying to outbox Joe Joyce. And we were having problems there. And then when we got in the round, in between rounds, I was like, hey, man, get in some of your switch cross series, get in some of your stance switch series. We're here to play. We're actually here to help Joe. Joe just asked Francis to come in and spar. And I go, we're not really held to any obligation of trying to be his sparring partner. Let's use it to us to benefit, to see if we can explore new options. And those are the things I started to see right away. It's like, ooh, he's having problems with the switch cross. He's having problems with the step through overhand and the stance switches. And those things were landing on Joe. And then later on after the rounds, Joe was like, hey, what were you doing with this? And how are you doing that? So it was a lot of our systems that he was doing. And then, then obviously you guys saw it in the Stipe fight, the switch uppercut and things like that. He was able to add in. I think you have to come with a different approach, man. I just don't think you can go in there and just say, I'm going to outbox this boxer who's been doing this for 35 years. I don't think that's a good call.
Yeah, I think there are certain people that are made for combat sports, like the Deontay Wilders of the world. And you just can't teach what they have. And I think Francis Ngannou is one of those special specimens that brings in an incredible amount of power and things that, no matter how long someone's been training boxing for, they just can't overcome. So for people that are kind of hating on Francis's boxing, like look at some of these incredible fighters who have been able to come in and work off incredible skill sets and things that people don't have. It's kind of a God-given talent. So I can't wait to see what happens next. Just quickly, man, on PFL MMA.
Sorry, just quickly. Sorry, I hate to do this, but just quickly, you remind me, Dennis, before we forget, you remind me, speaking of God-given gifts and talent, it's your God-given right to not have stupid nose hairs and ears hairs ruining your life, your dating life, your work life, or even your social life. Men, mind your manholes, and no better way to do that with Manscaped's Weed Whacker 2.0 with the improved blades and motor. You can feel the power of nasty nose hair annihilation in the palm of your hands. The Weed Whacker 2.0 nose and ear trimmer uses the powerful 7,000 RPM motor with an improved steel blade system that upgrades the cutting performance from their first generation to better whack your weeds. You got the skin-safe technology that everybody loves. The Weed Whacker 2.0, it's cordless, rechargeable, has the battery of up to 45 minutes of runtime, and also it is included in all the packages from Manscaped, such as the Platinum Package 4.0 and the Performance Package 4.0, both of which are the best value for money. So it's never been easier to look your best, dudes. Save 20% off and get free shipping with the code submission at manscaped.com. That's right, that's 20% off and free shipping with the code submission at manscaped.com. Remember, from below to up top, get the best in grooming at Manscaped's shop. Isn't that right, Dennis?
That's right, man. And if you look sharp as a tack, it's time to book your flights, buy stuff online, and get yourself sorted as everybody's getting ready to travel around. And why not save some serious money with our friends at NordVPN, who are basically putting money in your pocket by giving you opportunities like buying flights and cheaper hotels, car rentals, and all sorts of things through different virtual locations. You can actually save money by buying something in a different currency. Like myself right now, I am enjoying the NBA with the playoffs happening right now. Buying the NBA League Pass from Malaysia saved me basically $60, and it could save you a ton of money too. And by the way, NordVPN is just the price of a coffee a month. I mean, think about that for a second. You're spending nothing to gain all sorts of savings. One of the best apps in the game, and you can use one Nord account up to 6 devices. Right now, the deal is crazy because NordVPN is giving you a huge discount. Plus 4 months for free if you go to nordvpn.com/submission. But they're not trying to lure you into this thing. They're happy for you to try it risk-free for 30 days with a money-back guarantee. So jump on right now. Go to nordvpn.com/submission or click the link in the description below and try Nord for yourself. You won't turn back. It's an absolute game changer. And by the way, I am loving all the different Netflix from all around the world, thanks to Nord, without having to subscribe to 1,000 different streaming platforms. NordVPN really, really has you sorted. But Eric, just quickly back on PFL MMA, man. I know everyone's hitting you up. Everyone wants the 2 mil. Everyone wants to get locked in. But do you have anybody in mind, in a few names of PFL MMA that kind of you're like, okay, like some of these guys could potentially make sense for 2024?
I don't. And I looked at the roster, and I mean, obviously that was the first question, like, man, who the hell would we fight? You know, the Verdum's name's been out there. Who's going to become available maybe by that time? Who's a free agent by that time? And I started like to think about it more, and I was like, well, shit, this isn't even my job. I'm not the promoter of this organization. That's their job. They got to figure that out. But as a coach, you would like to have a kind of an idea so you can at least start laying some groundwork on what your game plans would be versus certain individuals. But by having that $2 million purse, I think you're going to find a lot of suitors. Like I saw the numbers for this Charlotte card for the 2 heavyweights. And, you know, those dudes combined for, you know, 260,000 or whatever it was combined. And, you know, there's going to be a market out there. And I think that's kind of why Francis put that in there to help out and to grow the brand, but to also entice maybe some people that are wavering on what they want to do with you know, certain different organizations, and maybe entice them over to depth, put some depth of that talent pool in the PFL for them.
Yeah, 100%, man. Eric, I won't take up your whole day, so we'll let you go in a second. But just quickly, I know Francis is kind of the main thing we want to talk about, but also Sean Strickland, another one of you guys, he's got his fight coming up. But the middleweight title picture is kind of crazy. Obviously, Israel spectacularly recaptured the belt. But now you've got Rob and Nicksick fighting in July, International Fight Week, for the title eliminator. But then 9 weeks later, September 10th, is when the UFC are coming back to Sydney, and they want, you know, Israel basically headlining against the winner, which is funny because a lot of people are already like, well, it's probably going to be Rob. We're probably going to be seeing the trilogy. And like, I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen, but if you're the UFC, that's probably what you're loosely planning, right? Why else would you be coming back to Sydney? But then you got Sean Strickland, right? And like, Israel's talked a lot about wanting to fight Sean Strickland, and you just don't know how that Rob and Nicksick fight's going to happen. Like, somebody might get injured. I just wonder, like, your thoughts on Sean as far as where he stands in the title picture, and if he could potentially fight in September if things work out.
That's a great question. And, you know, after our last win against Imanov, I think just because he's a fresh face and he's not a fresh face by any means. He's a fresh opponent for Israel. And they had that like little thing during the press conference that I think gained a lot of traction. It was funny to watch, you know. And I just felt like, you know, Israel's really cleaned out the division. Robert Whittaker's always going to be that guy to me that he can fight for titles all the time if he can. So it's really Whittaker and Israel, and then whoever fresh name that gets popped in there. So when we got a boost fight, it wasn't like anything to move the needle for us. I personally was like, I don't know, man. Like maybe we just sit around and wait. But that's just not him. He's just a fighter and wants to fight constantly. I mean, obviously in our gym, he's fighting every goddamn day. But as a strategic move, you know, it almost like, do you want to sit on this win and kind of wait? I don't know if that's the win that takes us over the top, only just because Israel has never fought Sean. Maybe that's the reason why it would go down. But yeah, I'm with you guys. I think Whittaker is the guy, man. I think he washes Nicksick, and then, you know, those Israel and Robert will do number 3, and those are very entertaining fights themselves. So you know, credit to those guys. I'm looking forward to it, and we'll be ready if they need us. That's for sure. Yeah,
because that's the thing, right? Like, you know how it is with injuries and fights, Eric. It's like 9-week turnaround. Nicksick is a tough guy. You know, a kick lands the wrong way, it's going to take you about 3 weeks just for the bruising to swell down for Rob, and then leaves him not much time for a camp. And then who knows what kind of injuries he'll walk in there with. So you're saying that if Sean comes out unscathed on July 1st, there's a chance you guys might push for that spot if Rob is unable to compete.
Absolutely. And I think that gives us the right amount of timeline to keep our weight down, to stay focused on that next opportunity. Because the phone rings a lot of times, guys, and it's short notice for Sean Strickland. And we've been on the other end of that. We saw it when the Imanov fight, when Kelvin fell out. We had 4 days notice, I think. This dude was literally sitting on the couch. Thankfully, he comes in. He's such a great teammate. He was in here helping Brad Tavares get ready. And that was really the only reason why we're like, okay, we'll take this fight. So the way the timeline stretches for us, if he gets that nice win during July, make sure, hey, bro, you got a week or two off and we're back in the gym. And that weight needs to stay low and stay within striking distance, because the phone rings. It's not 186, boys. It's 185. And we got to be on that dot. So, that little extra pound, you guys know how it goes, man. Like it's tough. So, and furthermore, we're not fighting just somebody. It's going to be either Israel or Robert, and they're beasts, man. There's nothing you want to take lightly. So game planning and getting the camp together is going to be just as important.
Yeah, man. And that flight to Australia as well, cutting weight going across. Trust us. I mean, Casper, we don't cut weight, but we fly the cheapest flights possible when we go to the States, and we're basically half dead for like 3 days when we come back.
Oh, bro, I cannot imagine.
Yeah. We're like, hey, we have no money. Let's just like sit in the luggage area and hide in the plane. But I was going to say, just quickly, for the doubters out there, as we wrap up, for the doubters out there that believe that Israel kind of wins that fight with Sean, what's your message to them? What are they missing about Sean as a challenge for Israel?
I mean, dude, it's a tough fight. It's a tough fight for Sean, and we understand that. And, I've had a game plan against Israel when he fought Brad Tavares, and there was mistakes that we made, and it wasn't underestimating him by any means. There were just logistics mistakes that we made. And I learned so much from that fight with Israel. And I've always been a fan of him and his camp and everything else. So it really helped me. The fight game is all about, it's a lot of times too much about egos, and you're able to learn a lot from your opponents and even in your losses, and take that information and go and apply it to some things that maybe you missed out on or you weren't thinking about. But like Israel's feint game, his movement, the way that he essentially draws fights or fighters in and was able to do pull counters and a lot of his techniques, man, it was very refreshing for me to go sit down and just watch and learn and grow from, So, Sean is a different style of athlete than we really have, right? Like Sean is just just wants to be a bull in a china closet with the pressure.
Yeah.
And, when you hold pads for the guy, it's not a technical pad session. It's like just kind of like fighting. Whereas other athletes that I have, like when you hold pads for them, we're doing a lot of deep understanding of angles and doing the things I think that Israel's more accustomed to. So it's funny. It's like I have this Viking who just wants to just, I always joke around. He's like the guy from Braveheart that had like an arrow through his chest and missing an arm, and he's just running charge. It's like, holy shit, bro. Like there's a lot more to this game. But he's actually, surprisingly, Sean is very technical and he's very bright when it comes to the game. And he's really going to need to be, or all of us, not just him, us as a staff, we're really going to have to be on our P's and Q's if we ever get that Israel fight and really understanding, because I have a pretty good idea of what Israel's approach would be in attacking us. And, we're going to have to be on our P's and Q's when we fight a guy like that.
I hope that one day we get to see this game plan of yours, because you're getting me excited just hearing about it. In the meantime, and even if you want to just pop down to Australia or Sydney just to kind of, suss things out and, be among the hopefully the middleweight title fight, we'll show you around. Come on down. In the meantime,
I'm down.
In the meantime, Eric, congratulations to yourself and Francis and the team on just a landmark milestone moment in the combat sports world on this deal with PFL and Francis Ngannou. Make sure to follow Nick on socials at Eric_XCMMA on Instagram. What a pleasure of a chat, Eric. First time. Thank you so much, man. You're welcome anytime. We'll definitely be hitting you up a lot more in the future.
My pleasure, guys, and thanks for reaching out, man. I thought you guys didn't like these American coaches over here or something. So I don't know what the hell's going on.
We'll be making up for it.
Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Eric.
Anytime. Take care.